March Comes In Like a Lion is kinda a hard series to pin down for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, just because there isn't a particularly straightforward narrative. The central character is Rei Kiriyama, a 17-year-old professional shogi player. If you don't know what shogi is, and I didn't, the closest comparison is calling it Japanese chess, really. So it has a board of so many squares by so many squares, and you use pieces such as knight, pawn, queen to take down your enemy, and it's a very strategic game. So Rei is somewhat of a child prodigy and makes his living working from tournament to tournament and goes to high school on a part-time basis. So just from that kind of synopsis, it's clear that there's a usual trajectory to go. The shogi definitely still is a core aspect of the show, and in fact it gets more important as it goes along. But it's not Rei's rise to the top or him trying to be the very best. It's way more fun than that, because it's about his depression and guilt. And of course, eventually, slowly, his attempts to recover from this, where the title comes into play, as it's half of the idiom, March comes in like a lion, but goes out like a lamb, meaning literally the change from winter to spring, but also metaphorically about struggle. And this recovery mainly comes from his interactions with the friends he makes from shogi, but also a family of 3 sisters who basically take him in and look after him occasionally. It's that relationship with the girls that's sort of used as the main selling point of the show, as you can see on all the covers and the trailers. However, that's again what I mean by it being a very hard show to pin down, because while the relationship really is the heart of the show, and its majority of the heartwarming scenes, it isn't really more than half of the overall show. If I had to compare it to a format, I'd strangely call it like a diary. So each chapter from the comics is directly adapted straight to the TV show, which comes up on screen and you get either 2 or 3 per episode. And because of that format, it doesn't feel so much like it's a plotted narrative, so much as you just dropped into the world whenever it's relevant. A chapter might just be about Rei having dinner with the girls, where there's no big emotional breakthroughs or heavy topics discussed. It's just that it's a nice family dinner, and it feels strange to say that it's an occasional lack of overall purpose. I mean, you do bond with the characters and find out more small details about their life, it just doesn't move anything plot-wise, and it's these lack of purpose moments that just sell the world and really get you involved in the people. Speaking of which, we get to the characters. While every character can very easily be categorized right from the outset, it's like the quirky one, serious one, the butt of the joke, each person that's really given at least some time on screen have moments to show a different side of them. And even better, it's that these aren't given through meaningless side plots or monologues to pat things out and distract from main story at hand. It's just that mainly it's just from small gestures or little quirks that occasionally catch you off guard and make them seem all that more realised, and again just make the world feel that much more alive, which I think is actually much more essential to the show than initially realised. Because I said earlier, it's sort of like a diary, and it's very much Rei's diary. So of course that leads into explaining his daily life and his interactions with people, but mostly it's because it feels like it's from his perspective. I talked at length in my A Silent Voice review about Headspace and how that used filmmaking to really tap into the aspects of the characters, but I would say that this just takes it one step further by making something that's not achievable through anything but animation. I mean artistically, not literally, as it's already based on a book, and it's now being made into a live-action film. Here's 5 seconds. So what I mean is that it uses the medium to its fullest and produces the best possible version of this story. We've talked about it before on the channel with video games, and I suppose partly in the Silent Voice review too. It's the question of, why did this need to be what it is? Could that video game be a film? Could that film be a play? Could that play be a book? It's not like if the answer is yes, it automatically makes that project lesser. It's just that if the answer is no, it means you're creating something that's unique to that medium and utilising it in an interesting way. With March Comes In Like a Lion, it's not only trying to explain how Rei is feeling in that moment, but it's also changing the mood to reflect that. So when it comes to, say, a running theme with the series, the idea of depression feeling like being underwater, it's not just that Rei's saying that, and it's not just dream sequences of him struggling for breath, which they are in there. It's just that it also changes the art style to reflect if it's somber, if it's lonely, if it's down to fear, and it's this multifaceted nature of the animation that just makes this show so mesmerizing, because it feels so real in how it's never the same. So again, while motifs repeat throughout, there are enough differences to show how they're reflections of Rei's mind at all times, and that's entirely down to art style, animations, and shots, which you just can't achieve without the motion, the sound, and you just can't capture it with a camera. I know that this all sounds like very basic stuff that every series tries to attempt at some point, but the style of it doesn't mean that you're watching and interpreting what each thing means. It becomes very instinctual. And for a show with a depressed, non-proactive main character, it could be more than easy to get tired of him early on if you just don't connect with his emotions, and this show goes above and beyond with that. Now that I've gotten all my big, important points out the way, I could just list all the stuff that I wanted to point out. I really liked the character designs for this. While at first they kind of stood out as a bit uncanny, I find myself really coming around to it, and I think it just made it stand out from a lot of other things, which again really helped with getting you into the world. And also, this is really a pedantic point, but I think the lips really helped with the neutral expressions that the show frequently uses, and it's just a small thing, but I think with a different design, the people could have easily come across it as po-faced, as opposed to being thoughtful, which is obviously very important. And of course, one thing that this version can hold over the manga is that it has music and sound, which I briefly mentioned, that also plays into those artistic style shifts, but it also really lays the groundwork for some of the smaller scenes. So I think the more traditionally composed tracks are by far the more superior of the set, as I feel like they really capture a homely, warm emotion without being overly cheesy, and these mostly take place when he's with the sisters. However, the more somber and dramatic tracks also hold out on their own. And I know I've been strangely positive for one review, so I'll talk about some of the issues I have as well, which are that I did find that the occasional high-energy comedy scenes were a bit too much for me. And I get what it's trying to do, because it's in other scenes it's trying to push the emotions so far into the darker sides that moments later it feels like it needs to compensate it with the opposite. However, I think this could have just been as easily achieved through less in-your-face means, and it occasionally just comes off as a bit childish. Not a good analogy, but an analogy is sort of like Monsters Inc. where okay, Jack, where so the screen power, it's very easy to get, a reaction out of something negative, but it's so much more worthwhile, and it's so much more effective when you can induce a positive emotion, and you don't have to go overboard with that. A little bit of good can often offset a lot of bad. It makes me sound like a poster. Anyway, back to negative, back to the usual. They also keep including these 3D animated segments where they try to teach you shogi in song form, and it's designed to be like a kid's show because it's representing a character teaching a child shogi. However, these segments got old pretty fast because they were all very repetitive, like every kid's TV show song is, and they were explaining really lowest common denominator knowledge of the game, which didn't really help you understand the shogi scenes any better, so I didn't feel like they added anything to the series anyway. And I'd say if I had to point to one moment that felt the most like padding, that would be it. And of course, with all series, I did find that the quality did occasionally fluctuate throughout, with the odd episode not really grabbing me as much as others. However, it did always pull it off when it mattered, and those episodes in question were definitely few and far between. I'm very happy this managed to get a second season. I'm really looking forward to it, especially if it continues with similar pacing and quality. And it's great just to have a show where you can just sink into it for 20 minutes at a time, and I think that this really provides it. And while some might find it a bit too slow for their tastes, I'd really enjoyed it. I understand that was a much vaguer review than I typically give, and it's mainly just down to the nature of the show itself, which people that have watched it already understand, but it's not that I'm deliberately trying to keep back information for fear of spoilers or anything like that. As you probably already tell, again, from what I said, it's more that it's a very mood show, and it's about just getting to enjoy the characters, and you can't really do that through a review. You just got to watch it yourself. If you want to hear any other reviews, as I mentioned, I just covered Silent Boys. We also have lots of other film reviews on this channel. We just did a podcast as well, talking about Get Out, going into spoilers on that, so that's really fun. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.